All right, well, hey, welcome to our Monday, March 11th regular work session board meeting. I call the meeting to order, and I welcome our treasurer to please call the roll.
Mrs. Snow?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mrs. Shiver?
Here.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Here.
Dr. Urso?
I'm here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving right along, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Any question, or yeah, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm getting ahead of myself. Are there any questions regarding the agenda?
No.
If there are none, then Mr. Bertram.
Mrs. Snow?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan? Dr. Urso?
Yes. All right, does not appear to have any public participation for tonight. And that brings us to our presentation. And our treasurer, Eric. Oh, there's Eric. Hey, you snuck in here at the last minute. Hey, Eric. Welcome tonight. Thank you for joining us and giving us some information on the transportation facility project.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited tonight to go through a project we've actually, believe it or not, been talking about a transportation project for just over a year. It's been taking some interesting twists and turns as we've moved through kind of the navigation of this and how that project accelerated and moved through this entire process. And I'm excited at this point to go through and show you where we're at based upon some of the decisions that we've made and some of the things that have come about as we've gone through this entire project. So one of the things I would like to point out is that this is really part of a capital improvement plan that we put together when we started looking at this in a presentation that I did that I'm going to get more into detail back in January of 2023. But before we kind of really dive into the meat of the transportation facility, I thought it'd be great to give you some facts and figures about the impact of transportation in Middletown City Schools. It is a huge business. It's a big area that we go through to do this, and we transport almost 66%, just over 66% of our students are on our buses every day in Middletown City School District. That includes almost 3,000 special ed students and 1,100 special needs students that go through that have a variety of special needs that we need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. When we talk about transportation, how much that they are as far as the miles that they drive every day is that we travel 4,216 miles every day in transportation in this district. You take that over the school year and don't include any special transportation or anything out there, we actually are over 733,000 miles across all of our buses in the course of the year. So it's big. It's a big thing. They move a lot of kids over a lot of miles in the district. We operate 53 three-tier routes. That means that we start very early in the morning with high school routes. We go right into middle school routes. We jump right into elementary routes in the morning. Then we jump to a middle of the day route for midday, and then in the afternoon we do that all over again, but in reverse order. So it's a big operation. Each bus averages about 13,841 total miles per year, and we employ approximately 80 employees, which is big. It's a big sector of drivers, aides, mechanics, and administrative staff. The other thing we need to point out is that facility is not just alone with transportation. Also included in that facility is a section of our maintenance group that uses a couple of buildings out there, and we'll dive a little bit more into detail about those as we move forward. So here's a picture of Google Earth that shows where the area that we're talking about. The bus garage is down at the bottom corner, bus parking's behind. We do own this current lot that's back in the back, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the buildings that are here. The building at the front bottom section is transportation. We go behind, this is a maintenance, or where our outside crew, which includes people who are mowing grass, doing all of our exterior work. All of their equipment is housed in this back section. We'll highlight that in a minute. And then we have a workshop here that we use very regularly in the center section. And then, if you recall, in my timeline, we're going to talk a little bit about this property, but this is the Frontier property that we recently acquired, which is very integral to that site, as far as just being able to open things up. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that works here in just a bit. So the existing buildings, as I talked about, is the maintenance storage. This building here was actually built in 1985. That's when it was completed. So we're running on 40 years at this point as far as construction when this particular location was done. This building was a little harder to pin down, but it is late 60s, early 70s as far as where this building that is a maintenance shop that is off to just on the other side of the bus garage and behind Frontier. But we use all of those buildings right now in various fashions throughout the course of the day. So transportation is not the only one that's here. All these other areas are integral to our operations. So if you recall, we actually went out to the site, many of us. We walked it, we looked at it. We'll talk a little bit more about condition as far as things that are there. But there were things early on in this process that we determined that there's some condition issues and there's some use issues that we need to talk about. And I'll get more into detail as we move forward. But there's a variety of things that are important about this site, where the transportation offices are in the front section. This back section is the area that I talked about, that are grounds maintenance folks that we're looking at. There is a porta potty here that we have. That porta potty is there because we don't have access to the building in the evening and enough space for all the drivers inside during those time frames, that when they come back, that's what they have to use in order to be at that site. If you look down the edge of the building, there's definitely condition issues. It really pops out when you're there. When you're looking at a picture, it doesn't do quite as much of justice as far as what that looks like. And then this was just a view back at the back end of the property where we park the buses. It is paved, but it doesn't look like it because of the condition of the pavement over time. There's a whole area that is gravel in the back section and gravel along the edge, but the center section is paved. But there's a variety of things that go through with that are some problems. And I'd like to kind of highlight what some of those are. As far as issues with the current transportation facility, one is age and condition of the building is not great. So there is a variety of maintenance issues that we're going to have to deal with over the course of the next several years, regardless of what we choose or how we choose to move forward. And we're going to present a few options here in just a bit about what we can do to do that. I would tell you that the interior space of that building is very limited. If you recall when we were inside it, very small. Think about 80 employees in that section that are up front, and the restrooms and all the facilities to support that particular space. So it's limited. We do need to add additional space there regardless, as far as what option we go through to do that, to really have a facility that's big enough for the group that we have out there. Lack of driver's facilities. Break room, non-existent. It's currently in a bay of a bus garage where they can go and sit, and we don't have a big area where they can put stuff. We don't have lockers. We don't have any area for them to secure any belongings. And restrooms, there's actually 3 inside, but 3 total restrooms for all male, all female, all office staff is really limited. And that is why we do utilize a porta potty on the outside, as well as there is no access control or ability for them to get into the building when they get back from a trip at any point in time. So it's fairly limited. The other point that I'll look at as we move forward is the single entrance. If you recall when we went there, all cars, all buses come in and out the same entrance. It is a congested nightmare that we go through to do that, and one of the reasons that when I go through the timeline was one of the key features that we looked at for purchasing the property, which the Frontier property became available, and it'll come out through this timeline in just a minute about why that is and where. And that's one of the interesting twists and turns that we went through as we started going through this project that I think is important to note as we move forward. There is limited parking layout in the areas that are needed. There is parking kind of at the back, section of it, but to be honest, where the employees park, all of them clock in and out the front. All the business happens as soon as you turn into that driveway. So it really becomes a major issue from people walking from the back to the front, all the way through as you walk through that it becomes a pretty congested, poor layout, just based upon the way that it was originally designed. Now, there's space constraints and other things which allowed us with the Frontier property to address some of those. Poor walkability of the site definitely affects site safety as far as we've got parking on one side, people crossing over, buses, they're walking in and out of areas where there are buses. It's just not a great ideal walkable site from the way that the layout logistics are to be able to get buses in and out. And then, as I said earlier, no building access for drivers after hours, and there is limited technology, which really comes into play for space, number one. Number two, there's not technology such as projectors and all kinds of things out there to be able to do employee training, to be able to do any of those types of things. So we actually move them off-site when we're doing any type of large meeting, and that definitely becomes a challenge, specifically at the beginning and end of school year, because if you recall, the bus drivers aren't here. They're here right as soon as school starts and right as soon as school's done. So we're looking for spaces for those folks at very premium times. So if we talk a little bit about condition, and I am going to put, it is in the title, over 2 million, and that's an important number that I'm going to highlight later in the presentation as we move forward. But one of the key issues of the existing site is there is poor drainage, and we showed that when we were there, is that the building actually floods. The building in high rains creates an issue. That has created condition issues when it comes to the facility, creates uses issues, it creates a variety of things, and it's really about the way things have been designed on the site and things that are the way the water drains in that area, which would require a repair of that, is going to require major work regardless of what we do, including adding drainage. Anything in order to deal with the water issues is something we definitely need to deal with, and we have to deal with something along those lines. As you start going down, I'm not going to hit every single one of them, but there's just a variety of things that go through each one of these that we would need to deal with if the building stays where it is now, that we would need to address to put money into that site going forward, to bring it up to speed, bring it up to the areas that are there that would address some of those issues that we come through with doing that. And it's really an aging building. We're talking about a 40-year-old building plus, other ones over 50, and there's really been a little bit of deferred maintenance, to be quite frank with you, about things that are there that we would need to address. And as we look at that, this really is the last building in the district that has not had any major touch to it in this time frame. You look at all of our other buildings, they've been brought up to speed a variety of different ways. Are there other needs in the district? Absolutely. There's things that need to be done, things that need to be touched, but I think this one is a key priority for us to be able to provide the facility, number one, that's needed. And number two, I can tell you that we have over 80 employees that are there right now. One of the biggest things that you'll hear, and you can read it in the newspapers, we're having a driver shortage. Not only us, but everybody across the country is having a driver shortage. So part of that is from a recruitment and retention standpoint, I do believe facilities has an impact on that. I think it definitely can help us recruit, retain other groups. In fact, we know that we are a school that trains employees, and some of them go to other districts by us, not because of money, but because of other reasons that are there, which include they've got better facilities, they've got nicer things that are there to be able to do that, including districts that are right close by to us, in fact neighboring districts, and ones that are just south of us. So there's a variety of things that, number one, we're going to have to spend money on regardless to do this. And that 2 million number is a key feature as we move forward. Something came on. So one of the things I want to point out is the timeline. Like I said in the beginning of the presentation, we started discussing this back in January when I came to the board and said, we're going to have to do something. We don't know what. We don't have a particular timeline at this point, but we need to start planning what's going to happen from transportation. Because just looking at it from a condition standpoint and a variety of other things, we're going to have to do something. So we commissioned from that a feasibility study, which was to say, what can we do, where can we look, how can we move forward as far as looking at a particular fix to that situation. That feasibility study came back and said, yes, we can look at it, we could potentially do some upgrades, but the reality is there's some major issues with the building in looking at moving it or doing a building in a different area is probably something that we need to look at. And that we need there is enough space on that location in order to provide a building that would be adequate to address some of those needs that we had in the beginning. So that's kind of where we started. We weren't moving forward, doing anything. We didn't have any major facilities, maps, or site plans going out of that. Interestingly enough, this is where I say there's kind of a twist or turn that came through this, is that while we were talking about that, the Frontier property came available. Well, that was not expected as far as going through to do that, because the feasibility study was really looking at the original land that we were going to build on. But that piece came available because we were looking at other sites all the way through Middletown to say, is it better for us to move? Can we look somewhere else? We had multiple realtors that we had in that process. And when it came available, we were, well, is this site big enough? Well, number one, the feasibility study said yes. Number two is it came available, and that solved a lot of problems. So regardless of what we were going to do, we felt it was important in a recommendation for myself that we needed to purchase that land, because they're not building any more land next to us. You know, it doesn't always become available. It's definitely a key piece that we went through to do that. Then we did the transportation facility walkthrough with the board in August, kind of showed some of the things that were there. We still didn't have really a full plan. We knew we had to be doing something moving forward. As we went forward in that, then the option to purchase the Frontier agreement was finalized, settled, done. We had all that kind of put into our place. We purchased the land in August, and shortly thereafter, the community center project dissolved. Well, why is that important? Because at that point, there was a pot of money that was set aside for another project, and we knew that this project was one that, number one, satisfied the requirements, number two, could be used to do this, and number three, one that we felt we could bring to fruition in the time frame that it needed to be done in order to do it. And that's very important, because we've had money that was set aside for a variety of things, but the reality was that we couldn't bring those projects to close in the amount of time that it needed to be because of lead time issues for equipment and all types of other things. So that's a key to the way that this piece worked out. We didn't have a budget. We said at that point, it's kind of, well, we think, you know what I mean? We think this is going to be a amount that we could do that, but we didn't have all the information forward. We felt it was going to get us a long way to that point. We, meaning me, going through that process of saying that we felt it would get us a long way through, but we don't know. You know, we didn't have all of the things that are with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the construction model phase here in just a little bit. So you guys allocated the money to go through and do that. And then we started really investigating what it was going to take to get this done, because we were on an absolutely ridiculous time frame, okay, to get this done. Very, very condensed. To get everything done, to spend really the ESSER dollars in a way that we could go through and do that. First thing that had to happen in that process is we had to hire a criteria architect. Well, the criteria architect is not a design architect. It is an architect that says, yeah, it's possible. Here's what the major categories you need to look at and need to do to make that happen. And that's what we hired. We moved forward in order to go through that process to see what we could do to get there. But we were moving really, really quickly, and we're going to move really quickly going forward with a couple of areas. One is the first major hurdle that had to happen for this project to go is that we had to have approval from the state of Ohio grant overseeing department, which is the CCIP. So the oversight department had to allocate the money, put it there and say, yes, this is an acceptable project. We weren't sure at that point whether they were going to accept it or not, to be honest. We had a really great rationale. We went through all the statistics, we went through all the things and said, this is how it impacts it, this is how it meets ESSER guidelines, these are the things that go through to do that. And they came back on January 2nd and said, yes, you have the go-ahead. You have the approval to do this. At that point, we were really moving simultaneously, going down both paths, and I'll talk a little bit about the construction process here in a little bit. But we knew we had approval, we had money set aside for at least a portion of the project, if not all of it. We didn't really know exactly as we were moving forward. We knew we had other buckets of money we could tap into, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit as well. So we continued to move that process forward, and the next piece came available is if we are going to do this project, we need to find another place to put buses and put everything in order to do that. There was a piece of property just down the street that parks semis. Well, we wanted to lock that in pretty quickly because it's very cheap to be able to get it done, but locked in. But if we couldn't release that spot to put somewhere close by, it really puts a wrench into the entire construction process. So I brought that to you at that point, and we leased that space, cancelable at any time, cancel out of it, but put that at that place. So we've been kind of talking through this process all the way through. I know it's been a bit not exact because of the fact that the process has been very, very quick about where we go, what we do, and the reason for that really is the design method that we have to do in order to satisfy the CCIP guidelines. So with that being said, we're at the proposed project. As far as where we're at, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we look at this particular site in a way that's going to make it functional and work through those. We knew that we needed to replace square footage that's there. So those are the existing square footages that are each of those locations. And we needed to make sure that we could function out of this site. So that was kind of the core piece of where we went. Other key factor that went into this as we started looking at it is not all of our operations are at the same place. So we also have a maintenance shop that's at the high school, which is 7,500 square feet that operates. So right now we are operating between the two. We have people moving between the two. We have people that all of the trucks that they drive from this facility are all fueled from that facility. So there's some logistics around that I think we can improve if we look at one additional option going forward. Not without a cost, but one additional option going forward. So if we looked at options based upon where we're at now, one is maintain the current facility. So if we maintain the current facility, we know that 4.375 million of ESSER dollars is going to have to go somewhere else. Why? We don't have time to build contracts, do things that need to be done in order to make that happen and spend money. Is there a small portion? Maybe. You know what I mean? Not a lot, but definitely not $4.3 million worth of money could be in to do that because there's just not the time in order to get those pieces taken care of. Second figure would be is we could replace the current configuration. In other words, build the bus garage there, add a little bit of extra square footage because of the needs that are there to do that, and leave the two separate. Maintenance at the high school and all the maintenance facility at transportation. That's definitely an option. Third option is we looked at is could we consolidate and would there be a benefit to consolidating? Absolutely. There would be a benefit to consolidating. We can kind of talk a little bit about the benefits as we move forward through each of those. But those are kind of the three areas we started to look at and want to present to you as far as going forward. Because we're at the point now that tonight I'm doing a presentation. Next meeting, we have to make a decision and we have to move about where we're going to go. So literally from this point forward, it's going to be flat out, very fast moving in order to make sure that we get all those things taken care of for the facility. Apparently I can't operate the clicker.
There we go.
So I do want to point out a couple things. There's really only 4 methods that we can use in order to build things in Ohio by law for a public entity, okay? All 4 of those methods are listed there. If you look at construction manager at risk, construction manager advisor, construction manager at risk, design, bid, build, and design build are the 4 methods we can use to build any building in the state of Ohio right now as a public entity. The top 3 go through a process that is longer than the last one, which is why the last one is the key consideration in this. And what the last one does, differently than the first 3, is all the first 3, you have a design that you pay for and do ahead of time. So early in the process, you hire an architect, somewhere in there. They spend months and hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get those pieces built, done, and put together. When you do that, then you have a set of construction documents that you put out to bid that then gives you a very good idea beforehand exactly what the price is of everything. Plus you have all the environmentals, all the feasibility studies, all those things going into one that gives you a really good, so you can pretty confidently stand in front of a board and say, it's going to be X number of dollars, okay, in order to do that ahead of time, before you go through the whole build process. The design build was put in for just the reason that we have here, which is a very fast time frame. Because what it does is it designs and builds it together. It puts it into one and moves it quickly in order to get to where you need to go. So at this point, we don't have a design. I have a concept that has a floor plan, that has basis that goes through that can give us square footage that we can move forward in order to do that. But it's not through the entire design process at this point. That won't happen till later, and I'm going to go through that here in just a little bit about each of the steps as we move forward. So here's the design build process. 1, you develop a request for qualifications for criteria architect. We've done that. That is the first step that we did. What they do is what I talked about earlier. We selected and hired. We've done each of these steps. Define the project and potential scope for a conceptual budget, not the actual budget, because there's a variety of things that have to go forward. You then send out a request for qualifications for design build firms. We've done that. We advertised, we put it out across all the state of Ohio to say, hey, there's this potential project. We want you all to come in and bid. And this is where you get that check and the balance along with the criteria architect to make sure that you're getting the pricing that you need. It's competitive. It's a competitive bidding environment that they go out to do that you put those out there, you shortlist a list of design build firms that, number 1, are qualified, number 2, have done similar projects of this in the past and can prove it. And that they have things that they've already put through this. We had 3 bids come back, which, to be honest with you, given our timeline, I thought was really good. So those 3 bids were shortlisted to 3 firms, one being Prodigy, one being Graybach Construction out of Cincinnati, and the third one being Conger Construction, which is right here in Lebanon, or just close by in Lebanon. So those 3 firms all have had experience, and we shortlisted them, interviewed them through this process, and said, okay, do we believe which these firms have the ability to do it, and we rated them based upon what their qualifications were. And they're different ones. And I'm going to come back to you next week with a recommendation on which one I think we should choose to move forward on this project, because we're still in the process. So then what we did is that we published a construction plan process to generate interest, and we had a short list of those design build firms that we went through. And the next step is there's a second proposal. So this project has actually been out for bid 3 times right now. 1, criteria architect. They set the criteria. 2, for the design build RFQ for the qualifications. And the third one was an RFP, which is a request for proposal. That what that does is it sends out to the shortlisted groups, we want a proposal that defines design fees and construction fees. That locks us in to the management of that project. Now, we have the ability to still deal with scope, as far as how big it is, how small it is, how many square feet. And ultimately, through this next month timeframe, we need to come to what's called a GMP, which is a guaranteed maximum price. That's where the budget hits the road. That's where everything locks in. And we have the ability to off-ramp at any point with this process. So if we look at what have we spent at this point, spent a little bit of money on a criteria architect, spent a little bit of money on a feasibility study. We've not spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a design. That's coming. So once we get to the point where we hire a design architect firm, then we will have contract pricing. You'll have that in front of you next week, or next board meeting, not next week. So that's what's coming back as far as the contract to have those pieces put together. We need to continue this process by selecting that design firm in March 2025. The next board meeting, we need to be working through that. 2024, excuse me, March 25th, 2024. Too many numbers there. So after we put them together, then they will take our concept piece and refine it down to exactly what it's going to be, come down to a per square foot price for each of the areas that are out there, and we will lock in to say this is the product at that point. So none of that's happened. And again, we have off-ramps all the way through that whole process. If we get to the point where we've hired the construction design build firm, they go through and design a project, they're going to have an hourly rate that we're going to have to pay, and we'll monitor that. So every time they start going through, if we get to a point where their design is done and we say, we don't want to proceed anymore, we can do that. We will incur the cost of what they had as far as putting in that time frame to do. So that is important. Once we get to the guaranteed maximum price, that's exactly what it is. It's a guaranteed maximum price. The construction manager, design build firm says, we can build you the building you design, we design for that price. And that's where it locks in. And then they'll build. We'll issue a notice to proceed. Construction process will proceed. Key thing with this, the building that we are asking to build is really a pre-engineered metal building. A lot of the design of that happens early, and it's by a firm that we will have. So there's a front loading of a lot of the cost of the building in just purchasing the building, because all the materials and all that goes up front. We will actually have 2 guaranteed maximum prices if we decide to go through this, and we'll talk about pricing here in a little bit. But the 2 pricing will be 1 ESSER guaranteed maximum price, because that has to be spent by September 30th. So it has to be done. We have to be able to have, this is what it was spent for and where it was spent. Second piece would be the other funding sources other than ESSER guaranteed maximum price that will close out the building. That will allow the construction project to continue past the ESSER guideline and the ESSER deadline. We do have an attorney opinion that documents and has all of those things in line about, yes, this is an appropriate way to do it. The other part is we've satisfied every requirement for public bidding to go through this process. It's fast. I can tell you the other ones are a lot slower. The other ones have a lot more defined up front. I get that. This is probably new, different than many people have kind of gone through to do it, but it's really dictated by the speed. You know, as we went through that timeline, we're talking, there's not a lot of time from the time we opened this up to now. We'll go to the next one. So if we look at this right now, there is the site. That would be keep and renovate. We can do all kinds of things to that building to make it better. Absolutely. Can we do it? Sure. Can we make entrances better? Sure. It can be done. We can't use ESSER to do it because I can't get it done unless it's part of that design build process that we've already gone through. The other part of it would be, I guarantee that I'm going to spend more than $2 million. I'm going to spend multiple millions of dollars. Do I have that for you today? No. I don't know whatever all those pieces are going to cost, because that really wasn't the focus on where we were going. But I do know that we would have to spend money in order to do that. Next one. So proposed solution 2 is kind of really what we talked about early in this process, is we can solve it by doing a new building. And we're going to overlay this on the site here in just a little bit. But this solves a lot of the issues that we identified up in the beginning of the project, which includes pavement for everything. It includes the building that we talked. It separates car traffic from bus traffic. It puts the fueling station in the back. It doesn't create all of the congestion in the front. All of these are back-end parking, so the site traffic goes in a circle with all the walking essentially in the middle next to the building, not crossing traffic. So you've kind of taken all those factors and really put it into one area and addressed a variety of different things. So it's a good plan. Is this exact plan? No, it's a concept plan. We're gonna have to work through a few things. We know it's got the number of parking spaces, we know the size, we know the things. Is it pretty far along? Yes. Do we feel we can get it to the point where it's construction document phase pretty quickly? Yes. So this is definitely a major improvement from what we have. We go to site number 3. So we talked about 3 options. Third option that seems to be very attractive right now is the fact that we can actually add where that red square footage is on here, bump the building this way by about 7,500 square feet, and bring the high school operation to this location. Comes with a price, it's not free. There's a variety of things that you have to go through and do that, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. But I can tell you that if we don't do it now, it'll never, likelihood is it will not happen. Just because of the way that the configuration of the site is to do that, and once you get there, it's not going to. There are a variety of benefits, but there is increased cost, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But don't get hung up on just where everything's at. We'll move things around, but that is the square footage of all 3 of the options. If we go to the next slide, here it is overlaid on the site. So you can actually see the red area where we would be adding the additional square footage. If you look in the middle section, the old building is there. The old building's down at the bottom. You go up to the upper part, the building really sits on top of that proposed, of the old of the maintenance shop area. Yep, so right in that, off just a little bit, yep, right there. So in front of that, that building sits where the gas pumps are and where the back of that maintenance building is. So to do that, the reason that site was chosen is because it maximizes the amount of space on that site to be able to get separated parking, as well as that site is where it needs to be. We can raise the elevation in order to get there. So hopefully that kind of gives you a picture about where it would be, how it would be, and how we would put each one of those on. Next one. I do think there's a massive, or many, benefits to consolidating operations. And I think they translate into a cost factor that we can move through later, and we'll give you a few assumptions that I made as I'm kind of moving forward. One of the big things is that if we move that particular site from the high school to here, create the square footage, it frees up the square footage of the high school. The square footage of the high school is 7,500 square feet. We currently operate a warehouse about that size, a little bigger than that. Then we pay $30,000 annually to lease. We can immediately stop that when we build it, move that, and get that savings. The other thing that I would put in the fact that right now we have a variety of technology that's stashed away in all kinds of places across the high school, every building, all over. This would allow us to provide a safe, secure area for technology and have a person man it from that location that would be able to deploy it. And the other benefit of that is that it would provide a space for deliveries that somebody is at. Right now, nobody's at the warehouse. So anytime we have a delivery that goes to the warehouse, one of the maintenance people stops what they're doing, drives all the way over there, unloads it, does all the things that are there, closes it, and drives all the way back to wherever they were at. So just the lost time, effort of doing that creates a huge piece. The other one is we use space at the high school for technology that could then be freed up for a classroom. So it gives us additional space that's there now that we would be able to use. The other one is, to be honest, single location for all maintenance operations, communication, talking to employees, seeing them, working with them, directing them. Right now is remote in many cases. This allows the supervisors and the people to be there on a daily basis, to be able to interact with each other, which is absolute positive all around, just from a management perspective. We already talked a little bit about the employee travel time and preparation time. They do use that space at the transportation center to store equipment and to also build things and maintain things. There's equipment that is currently in those buildings that we use. And there's a variety of days that they go out there to work. So can we consolidate that to another location? High school's busy. High school's busy. Especially during the time that our employees come in and out, is right during bus dismissal. The reality is that if we move it out to the other location, that's going to improve. That was somewhat counterintuitive that you're going to put it there. But the buses all leave very early in the morning, but where do they go? They go to the buildings. So when they go to the buildings, they're right in that same area that the shop is. So it frees up space. The other part of it here is that where they park at the high school would be freed up for a variety of other things, including the high school and middle school. One of the key factors that we would look at, exterior storage at the high school location is not great. I think it'd be better at this location, just from a security perspective, because it's hard to secure things at the high school, just because there's so many kids and things that are out there around that facility that makes it difficult. There's a limited fencing space there. It would increase dramatically here with the ability for us to be able to put the trailers and the other area things that we use out in that section. One other key factor is currently in our warehouse is all of the old district records. So everything back from payroll to the dawn of time is there, okay? So the way that it is stored is not what I would consider the best as far as where we're at. I don't love the fact that it's in a leased space with ability for outside people to be there, which is not great. So to be able to move it to our location would be, I think, a huge, tremendous piece. Now, could you take that and digitize it over time? Sure, huge expense in order to go through to do that. Last thing I would say, like I said earlier, if we don't do it now, I don't know when. I mean, I really don't. You know, I've been in education 33 years. You know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen opportunities come and go as far as to do that, and I know as we look at the costs here in a little bit, it is more cost, but I think it's something we need to consider. If we don't do it now, now is the cheapest time it's ever going to be. I can tell you the other thing, we've built a lot of buildings over the time, and none of them have ever gotten cheaper over time. In order to do that, they've only gotten more expensive just to build and to go forward. So I think it's a key factor. So if we look at how much will it cost, I don't have the exact number. I've already told you that early on, because the GMP is going to get that. What I can tell you is we do have a conceptual budget that is better than what we had when we first had this on. You know, our first thought was we can move it out there, we think it's a number. Problem with that is we didn't really consider all the factors as we started going through to do that, but this project's happening fast. You know what I mean? We moved fast, we went fast. There is opportunity for error. I do think that we're very close here. Is there opportunity for error? Sure. Is there opportunity for some contingency? Sure. We definitely need to make that's built into that. But we do know that if I'm going to repair the current facility, the reason I highlighted that $2 million number is it's going to be more than $2 million. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be more than that as we look at all the costs that would go into to make that happen. I do know if we replace the current facility based upon basic per square footage numbers with numbers that we got back from the initial bidding process, that it's going to be approximately $8 million, right in that range. plus or minus. I'm not gonna lock myself in, I'm not gonna tell you it's gonna be exact. When will it be exact? When we get to that GMP. So it definitely could slide up or down as we go through to do that. If we go with option 3, based upon the square footage, it's about $2 million more. It's about $10 million total in order to do that, which is a big number. So one of the key things that we go through to do that is, how do we pay for it? So if we go to the next one, we know we have funding sources. We knew early on there was about 4.3 million to 4.5 million that was going to be used for the community center. That money became available, and we knew that that would get us a long way in order to helping a bus garage. Not exactly sure how much total it was going to be, but that was going to be the big portion. We do know that also the additional ESSER money became available after the fact because of a couple of things. One is that we had money allocated in a capital improvement project that we didn't need through that process. We bid out chillers to all multiple elementaries, if you recall that. The budget that was originally put in was higher than what those worked out to be, and that's where a portion of that money came from. The other one was, we know that there was a lead time for roofing to get a section done that couldn't be done. That's in there as well. There's going to be other ESSER money that's going to be budgets that's going to come available, and Randy can definitely talk more on that. But we know that we have to spend the money by a certain amount of time. All of those were based upon budgets at the time. So some things come in less, some things come in more. Usually conservative estimates. So the reality is there's some extra money in ESSER that's available to do that. That's about 1.3 right now, 1.3 million today. Randy also had put aside a Medicaid escrow. This is money that was a settlement money that was put out from years ago, back, I believe it goes back as far as 2009. It was set aside for a purpose. It's been setting there for a while. I'm not sure, it was available in order to come to do something that would be really tailored to a project like this, which is a one-time expenditure, which is great because of the fact that that money wasn't reoccurring. It was one-time settlements that was put in there to do it. So he made it aware that that was available to do it, about 2.1 million. So if we look at what we have in the pot today, as far as cash in the bank, we've got almost $8 million today in order to move forward that has been approved through the ESSER projects to do that. Keep in mind, that's a key factor. It had to be approved in ESSER to do that. And all of this was to get through there to make that work. About 8 million. So we can definitely do option 2. Option 2 is replace it, do it, move forward. How can we get the benefits of option 3? Well, there's another bucket of money that's available, which is permanent improvement. We generate about $2.5 million annually to do that. So in that pot, that goes to projects very similar to this. It goes to anything that has to do with construction, has to do with our buildings, has to do with heat, lights, anything durable, 5 years or longer. We use it to buy computers too, which is a key factor. So as we move through this, that money's available. That's the money I would use if I was going to do option 1, is PI money. I would be dipping into PI money every year to do that over time. So one of the options that Randy and I talked about was you can take a COPS line out on that particular money and use it as opposed to paying 100% of it right now. Spread that over the cost of the building. The building's going to last 40 years. The building's going to be here for a long time. So use a little bit of it every year and still keep it available for all the other purchases that need to happen throughout the course of the year, which includes repairs to any building, or new computers, or vehicles. All those things that we use the money for. It's really the key piece to that is that we can use, we just want to take a portion of it and allocate it to something that we already would have done. So that's definitely a pot of money that's available that could be used to close that gap. So we move to the next one. So the first question always comes is how much and where. Randy put together two different scenarios. Scenarios at the top is that it's showing what the cost would be if you borrowed in increments of $1 million. So 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. If you did a capital lease for 10 years, that interest rate as of today is about 4%. That could go up by the time we get to the point where we go down or go to doing this. Probably not going to go down, based upon the markets that we have right now. But one thing that can happen, let's say that interest rate goes down 3 years from now. We can refinance this just like you can refinance your house to reduce that interest cost, or 4 years, whatever time period you go through. Key factor that you look at this is that the average annual debt service, if you borrow $1 million for 10 years, is $123,291. Over the whole 10 years, total debt service is $1,232,000. But keep in mind, we borrowed $1 million, so the principal of that is $1 million. The extra cost that goes for interest only is the $232,000 in that example. So you can see that for every dollar amount borrowed as we go forward, and that's going to be important here in just a minute. If we jump down to the bottom, 15-year loan, I believe that we can spread this out further, and the reason for that is it protects the balance today. Why is that important? I don't want to tie up all the, if we had 2.5 million, we could take 2.5 million of this project and put it, 2.5 million of PI and put it towards this project. It would leave us $500,000 to do it right now. Problem with that is we do have needs more than $500,000. There's other things that have to happen in the district to do that. So to spread it out definitely makes sense. I think you can go at least 15 years, which is the example that we're going to work with. The maximum you can do is 20, I believe. Is that correct, Randy?
Yes.
So you can go up to 20 years, which we know the building's going to last longer than 20 years when we go through this process. But if you look at that same example, average debt service, $93,000. That includes both principal and interest in that. Total cost over the life of the 15 years is $396,707 for interest. If we flip to the next slide, this is a breakout that shows each one of those. Key principle here is, principal is $66,000 annually. That's all I'm tying up. Annually, if I use for $1 million, and that's the basis we're working on, this $1 million. It does go up if you do two. Principal is $667 annually. That's all of that $2.5 million I'm tying up for the first $1 million. Next one is interest is $26,000. Those combined are the total. That is what I would need to save somewhere else to be able to not have a major impact on the cost of borrowing. So if I can save it some other way, which we already know, I'm going to save at least $30,000. We're going to talk about that in a second. But we want to protect those. So interest is the increased cost. So if we flip to the next one, $1 million cost of interest over the entire term of the loan is $396,707. Warehouse, $30,000 annually over 15 years is $450,000. I've already paid for, by not doing the interest or not doing the lease of the warehouse, more than the first $1 million would cost. By doing that, I have a surplus of $52,293 over the life of the whole life of the loan. So I'm actually $53,295 ahead at that point. So if we go to the next one, if we add $1 million, because we know we need $2 million. So each increment of $2 million, how do I deal with that? Cost of interest on the second $1 million is $396,707, same interest. But I think we can get other savings. First is the $53,000 that we already saved from the first section. Warehouse annual fee has gone up. I assumed an average of 1%. It's going to go up over 1%, probably more than that, Typically, it's going up 3 or 4 or 5%. That number at 1% is 48. So conservatively, I know I'm going to save that amount. Fuel savings due to traveling to other facilities. I think we average more than 3 per week, times that every truck drives between the two facilities. So if we do 3 per week, I would save $84,000, almost $85,000 of non-driving costs, because of the fact that it's all in one place, fuel's in one place, all those things are at one location, which I think is a huge savings. The other one is lost productivity. If they're driving that many times back and forth, they're definitely losing productivity in doing things. I think we can gain 1 hour a week where they're doing something else. How does that translate into savings for us? Instead of me outsourcing the filter replacements, my people doing that. So we gain a whole section of week from all of them doing that will then ultimately help us reduce doing other areas that we move forward. I think we can save conservatively the entire amount for offsetting the additional of interest costs. So that is a key piece for this. So if we flip to the next line, where are we at? Where are we? We've done all the things that the purple check mark is there. We've done the RFQ, we've done it. We are currently at developing or looking at the design fees of construction process that is there. So we've got that today, that we can move forward. If we flip to the next slide, and I forgot to capitalize we. The next steps, I'm coming back to you next board meeting. Actually, I'm not going to be here. And physically, I will bring a contract and I will be available virtually, because I will be in DC with my daughter. So, but I will be available for any questions and comments. But at that meeting, we're going to have a contract, because we need to move very quickly to get done in the amount of time that we have. At that meeting, we need to really define what the pathway is. We need to determine which one of these we need to set as far as the priority for the design firm to target. Option 1, not option 2 or 3, between those two. Because if that's option 1, we're not having it. So if that's where we're at, we don't want to do that. But it's option 2 or 3. And I really need to charge that group at that meeting to target that, so we can get this done as quickly as possible to figure out where we're going to go. Once we do that, we will then have, with contracts and all the GMP, we will be designing floor plan. They're doing it now. So we've already charged each of the groups to be hitting the ground running, but they need to be working on this to get ready for that, because they know our time frame. And then we will ultimately, at some point in the future, set that guaranteed maximum price. That's your budget. That's what it's going to be. It won't exceed that. It won't go forward. And then we will issue a notice to proceed going forward and begin the construction process. We will be completed with each of the GMPs in the time frame that we need to be to make it work. 1 for Esther, 2 for the overall project. Overall project's going to be a year project going forward. Good news is we can keep the building up and operating while we do that. So if you look at the overlay of the project, they can keep it moving with the rental of the facility down the street. We can keep things moving for that entire year. So I believe it's doable. I believe we have a budget for it. I believe we have funding sources for it. I believe that at this point in time, unless something changes between now and then, that my recommendation would be to do option 3, because of the way that we can do it from a funding perspective. But we'll be bringing you a recommendation at the next board meeting with backup contract documentation that will have construction management and design costs identified. So this meeting's informational only. I don't need a motion tonight. I know it's a lot. I don't know how long I talked, an hour?
No.
So I talked for an hour.
Now it's time for
But
questions.
to be honest, we've gone through this. I've worked, and my team has worked really hard to try to get this done in this time frame. It really is a very quick time frame, fastest construction schedule I've ever worked in my entire life. We knew it was aggressive when we got the nod back in October timeframe. And the key piece to that was the CCIP making that work. So that's what I need at the next meeting. I do think there is an opportunity individually for questions. I know I threw a ton at you at this point, a lot. So please, if you've got individual questions, certainly available as we go through today. And then as they pop into you, because you're gonna have a chance to look at everything I gave you, have an opportunity to go out after this, have questions, consult, definitely give me a call and we can kind of work through some things. And then we'll also present the next piece of this at the next board meeting. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and push it back to you guys for questions.
I have a couple. You can go
Yeah,
ahead.
I have, this is not, it's related, but it isn't. It's a question that just popped into my mind when you were talking about security and after hours and all that kind of stuff. These people that drive the buses to basketball games and football games and get home at 11 o'clock, are they out there alone in that, they're out there by themselves?
They're out there alone. They don't have the ability to go in to the building afterwards when they come in after a long trip to put anything away,
Okay.
to go to the restroom, to lock or secure anything that they would like to do that. There's no access control because the building, again, is 40 years old.
Sure.
And none of that stuff was even in existence at the time that that building was there. And all the other buildings, were upgraded with all those types of things. That would allow us to do that in a secure way, that we would be able to know who came in and out of the building.
I never thought of that until you were just talking tonight. Thank you.
I have like a variety of questions, so my colleagues can kind of interrupt me.
Please do.
And they're kind of fluid, and I don't expect answers to all of them tonight. If there aren't answers, then at some point, perhaps. But first off, thank you. That was a lot of information. I'm confident I have like 78% of it retained. And so forgive me if some of my questions don't hit upon some of the things that you probably discussed within it. There was a design that you offered. Who designed that? And I mean, how accurate would that be? And tied into that, the design build, it would appear that if you design and build at the same time, there is inherent risk.
There is.
In terms of just inefficiencies, not thinking, and I'm assuming these folks are pros and they have experience doing these things, but I would imagine that that's why it's one of the last things on that list in terms of an optimal building plan would have time to kind of work out some of the complications, and so you don't have issues as you go through. And so I'm trying to wrap my brain around that whole thing. And so who designed this first?
So I agree 100% inherently with what you're saying. As far as the design, this was actually started back a year ago. So we were looking at the concept with Fanning Howie about what it would look like if we did something going forward. It was tweaked with our criteria architect before this went out. So do I feel it's pretty accurate based upon that?
So who did this?
Fanning Howie.
Okay.
So Fanning Howie, in combination with Conger that we did with the feasibility study early on, is looking at this. So we've been looking at that particular design for about a year, okay? What we didn't know as far as going through that is all of the environmental factors that we had to deal with, as well as site drainage factors. And there's a variety of things that really started coming out as we hit the ground running. One other factor that's not included in this is that there is a design engineer, which is Kleininger's, one that I've worked with for years, that
It's a
went
local
through
firm.
that added clarity to the overall piece once we got this. So do I think there's risk? Yes. Do I think there's a large set of risk? No. There's risk in any type of building project going forward. So we've been working on it. What we didn't have was a great set of design drawings and costs that went into this, to be very honest. So it's designed by people who've done this a lot. In fact, both of those, Graybeck and the two firms that are currently in it right now, which is Graybeck and Conger, are firms that have built multiple garages, bus garages like this all over.
And they're basing it off of this rendering, or are they
Both.
creating their own?
They're creating their own, but it's based upon the basis that we have here, which was a basic criteria that there are some inefficiencies, there's some things that are in there that they're going to address. So they're going to take it and tweak it between now and then and come up with some of the things that we know are inefficiencies that are in here that will make that will design that more. Is there some risk? Yes, Chris, there is some risk.
And that kind of alludes to the second question. So if they're designing something, I would imagine that, I mean, it would be similar, but there's the opportunity that it could be different. And anytime it's different, it could be more or less expensive based upon the differences.
So it won't, it can be slightly more, slightly less. We did give them the design parameters around this. So we do know that it is very close to what it can be. Is it going to change a little? Yes. Could it be more? Could it be less? One of the things I would tell you is that we use that budget, the numbers, as more of a worst case scenario. And the reason that we built that in, there's 3 or 4 factors that we know are built into these numbers that we can address. One of them is a code issue that we know that has some sliding scalability to it that we can work with, that we feel very confident in. The second one in here is that there is contingency built in. We do believe that those high numbers are building in a higher level of contingency than we need in places. The third factor that this is built on is 100% Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. That is a higher level wage of what needs to be paid. We know that any federal project has to be paid Davis-Bacon wage. ESSER portion of this is at that higher level. Anything else will not, and all the companies are aware of that. The numbers I gave you included those 3 factors in it to be able to go through. So we do know there's some slidability and change, which is why I don't want to say it's exactly the numbers that I told you, because I know it's going to change. So do I think it's going to change dramatically up? No. Could it go up a little bit? Sure. Do I think it could go down? All those things have to factor out in the next few weeks. Good news is that they've been working on this. They've built them. I can tell you that there's a variety that have very similar footprint to what's in here that both companies have worked on. Franklin Garage, Talawanda, Sycamore, Wyoming. You know, all of those are ones that have built garages in the last few years that are very similar to this. So we're going to use those to tweak the efficiencies of what's here. Fanning Howey has done that as well. They've been involved in a couple of those. So that will be ironed out over the next few weeks. So I don't think there's a huge inherent risk. There is some risk.
Because I guess that goes into my experiences with the community center project, and when the GMP came back is essentially what created the conversation that led to this. And so my worry is that learning from prior experience, that those contractors, those businesses, I mean, they're working through systems and they understand that the market's fluid and they're going to bake in, I would imagine, any of that risk. And so they're a business. They want to make sure they have margins.
And they've built those into the proposal we have now. So we know what the margin is. Where we need to really work is where the design is. So we have the ability to fluctuate the design to get to the bid that we need, to get to the number we need based upon basic criteria. So I think we have the ability, we have more of an ability to move this than you do in the previous construction models that you've been involved in, where you've designed it and then went out to do it. This one allows more fluidity in the process to be able to get there. So I think we can get and achieve our goals. We may sacrifice a little bit of square footage, but we can make it work for what we need to do to get to where in the previous ones you couldn't do that in the time frame for ESSER.
And did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add too, because of the process we're using, we're expediting the project, and that does lower some of that risk for those long-term fluctuations in pricing.
And so,
It does limit pricing risk.
and I don't need a dissertation on Peterman and Peterman's contract, but my understanding is that we do not own the buses.
We do not.
And so, in my mind, I know we have to maintain the buses. I know 66.4% of our students ride our buses. I'm trying to unpack that, is that we're updating, maintaining, creating facilities for buses that we do not own. I just.
We're still paying for it.
I know we're
Okay,
paying a
so-
lot for them.
And I would add.
And so
we're
I guess
paying-
it leads into, Peterman has no obligation to be a part of this process, understanding that they own the buses, they control the quality of buses and the need for maintenance, et cetera. And so we're going to create spaces that, and I
we're
understand it's
still
13-odd thousand miles that they're driving. They're going to have issues, but old buses, and I see some of our buses, are going to require more than newer buses, et cetera.
Our contract with Peterman gives us the ability to make changes within that contract that controls how often those buses turn over. So instead of Peterman coming back and say, oh, every 100,000, every 10 years, as it was when I arrived here, we're going to buy new buses and replace those buses. Well, some of the cost cutting that we did early on in my tenure was we moved that to 12 years, 120,000 miles per bus, which they were perfectly fine with, saying, yeah, buses are still great, they're safe, still pass the highway patrol stickers, inspections, and so by having the nicer facilities, I move that we can maintain those vehicles even longer if need be, because we know they're getting taken care of properly.
The other factor I would put is all that translates into the lease payment that we pay them.
Yeah.
If every Peterman contract, they don't have their own facilities. They're using the school facilities in all the
And I
buildings that
understand
are out
that.
there. And it is really part of our core service, so we have to provide it.
I know this.
And the other part of it is that, let's say that they did do a building, I would say that they would put a markup on that of profit to put in there as well, just to make that, because that's what they do with their current base price. So the other factor to answer your question is they do have all of the tools, equipment, things that are in is theirs. So they are going to upgrade those as well as they go through the process. They'll take some of the stuff that's inside that would be theirs. They are responsible for furniture, which they'll be part of. So there is a component that they have in this. Is it 100% clean that we own the buses? No, we don't. But we definitely own the facility. And if we go, that's an important concept, because we could come back and be totally upset with Peterman 2 years from now and say, we want you to move out, and we can pull in another one.
I
So
understand
if
that.
they don't have that, if we don't own that, we don't have that option. Owning the buses would be another chip, because I've done it both ways as far as doing that. Is that something I would look at? Absolutely. I've been in a previous district that buses were outsourced, and we bought them back. So
Yeah.
do I think that's an option? Absolutely. Do I think we continue to look at that? Always. But either way, we've got to have, in my opinion, an upgraded facility to compete with everybody around us for drivers, and it definitely translates into money, dollars and cents from a maintenance perspective.
And I don't know the cost per bus, but I also know that if we're allocating so much resources to the maintenance and upkeep and creation of a new space, it does limit, I would imagine, our transportation cost to be able to buy. I don't know how many buses are in our fleet, 80.
So we have 53 total routes that run, so 53 buses run all the time. We have about 7 spares. So we have about 60 buses.
So 60 buses, that would be a big check to go to.
It would be. And in fact, I would recommend if you transitioned it, you would do not all new buses, but there would be a variety of used. You would have a variety of things that would go along with it.
And that's a conversation for a different day, a different night. I did
But
have
do I think that the $2 million that were set aside of PI we're taking away a great deal to do that for the loan perspective? I don't. You know what I mean? Especially when you break it down into that, it's like 4% of the overall PI budget going forward.
And I guess that leads into a question around the budget. I understand the ESSER allocations. What I'm a little concerned about is the Medicare or Medicaid, I forget if it's Care or
Medicaid.
Caid, distribution, because there would appear to be a little bit more flexibility with that. And I understand the need for transportation. I value what our bus drivers and the folks who are in that every day, and they do need a proper place to work. And it's been a long time since we paid attention to it. When I walked around, that was blatantly obvious. My concern is that the ESSER dollars, and of course those dollars too, the direct touch on students, whether it be, and I know initially with the community center it was around preschool, whether it be our youngest students or students throughout our system, I'm worried that we're going to take resources and utilize them for a project. And so in my mind, I'm thinking about what is the hierarchy in need, whether it be even within this project, or their potholes are the biggest priority. Is the flooding the biggest priority? Is it the lack of space? Is it having porta potties, which seem archaic to have our people use porta potties? And I apologize to them that is the way they have to utilize that. But just that is an issue for me to kind of you present a very detailed, thoughtful, for an hour you talked fluently about a lot of the intricacies that allude to this need. But it's hard for me when initially the ESSER dollars were directed towards a more obvious route to how they're going to address the needs of our students. And whether it be a $10 million project or an $8 million project or some other in between, I would like to have the ability as a board over the next few years to have resources to allocate towards those things. And I understand that there are other pockets, other monies, but I don't see, and I hope we don't have another pandemic that opens up ESSER dollars again in this kind of circumstance. So I'm worried that this project is going to limit our ability to do some other things.
From my understanding of the ESSER dollars is that.
And I know the ESSER dollars, that's not the money I'm talking about. It would be the loan, and it would be the Medicaid distribution, which together, that's over $3 million. That's a significant amount of money. And I'm also trying to think through, why are we having a warehouse when I know it's expensive? I saw you do this when you talked about digitizing the records that are going back to the early days. But I'm trying to understand, are there other ways to kind of achieve that might be more complicated at the beginning, but in the end, we don't have to move boxes and boxes of paper from one space to the other. That if somebody asks you for a record from 1938, that'll take you 38 years to go find that piece of paper within the stacks and stacks. I can only imagine trying to find that.
So I do think it'll take years to digitize that, I mean, over time, and significant amounts of money. You know, there's a variety of things, and Chris, I hear, and I struggled through these as well, as far as this being, you know, originally it was to the point of it being to the community center, and this is a backup project. This ended up being a point where can we, because it is very rigid to the ESSER dollar components.
And I'm not debating the ESSER allocation because I know that we have some limitations on time. My debate and my struggle is on those other monies. And as you present this, yeah, I mean, I would love to do all this, would love to make sure that we don't miss out on opportunities and bring back maintenance and save a day a week and so much gas and all those kind of efficiencies. But I also am thinking about what are the things that we won't be able to do, that money is going to be tied up in this. And there's no answer to that, and I don't expect an answer for that because I don't know what's happening next week, much less next year. Right. But I like to have flexibility to be able to do those things. And I'm also trying to learn from prior experiences and understanding that, and we're at the mercy of the information we receive.
Absolutely.
And you do, I believe, we trust that we're getting the best information at your disposal. But it's been difficult with these types of projects in our last year and a half, because the numbers have been so fluid. At one time, we're hearing numbers oh yeah, this is very hopeful, optimistic, we can do this. And then over a span of time, and grant you, there are factors out of our control, those numbers are dramatically different.
Agreed.
And it's not slightly, it's dramatic. And I looked at our timeline, there was 8 months between when we first heard that and when we started moving in this direction. 8 months, yeah, it's not a long period of time, but that's a decent amount of time to be able to do some things, to really understand what's going on.
And it really wasn't a focus, to be honest with you, at that point.
And I know there's
The
so many
focus-
things.
The focus happened in September is when we moved. So it's that time frame that we need to really work on, because we knew it was a need. It was really transitioning quickly. And I would put that, I would love to have more time. In fact, if you recall, when we went through this, I was like, I would love to have more time. You know, this is a definite time frame. Can we make the decision earlier? So, because I didn't want to be behind the 8 ball, which that's what this project is. We are moving quickly. Is there an opportunity? Absolutely. Is there some risk? Yes. Do we have numbers built into the care for that? Yes. So I hear you, Chris, and I know the board will have questions over the next 2 weeks. I'm happy to sit down, talk individually about those, about where I see it and what's going on. But that's going to be my recommendation.
My concerns are real as far as kids and their opportunities. First of all, I'm not sure that the community understands the real reason why we still have this $4 million in ESSER funds, because I saw it in the Hamilton Journal News, which must be right, a comment that we changed our mind about the Early Learning Center for this, and that was not true.
That's not true.
That was pulled out from under us. That was totally pulled out from under us. And I don't know that everyone in the community knows that, because once that kind of a message goes out, it's hard to pull it back in. The second thing, I remember at the beginning of this school year, and I preface this with, I've never had $10 million in my life, and I never will. So to spend this amount of money, I'm very aware of what this is. It's a lot of money. I also remember hearing at the beginning of the year 2 very nearby school districts who were constantly having to close or close a building of school. One to the north of us is still battling with bus solutions, and a lot of it boils down to we don't have bus drivers. If bus drivers are at a premium, and I don't say we should provide wonderful, I don't have to provide a cushion and upholstered chairs for bus drivers, but the things that you said are real out there. The dangers, the people coming and going at odd hours without any kind of a secure situation, that really bothers me. I wouldn't want to take those night trips, I'll tell you that. So I'm trying to balance that with, I know that as a board, we have to worry about the educational parts of our children's lives. I've been a teacher for more than 50 years, so of course that's top in my mind, but I also know that as a board, we have to offer, we have to help maintain things in the school district. The educational component is primary. When we're talking about our absence problems, get them here, get them here, get them here. So we've got to have decent bus systems to get them here. Those are, I'm fully aware of $10 million being an outlandish. I mean, it's just more money than I can even imagine in my life. But
So I can tell you from a budget standpoint, it's very in keeping with multiple that have been around. It is definitely not a Taj Mahal. We're not putting in, lots of fluff. This is pretty basic, what we need, where we go. One of the things that I would put to your point is the bus driver is the first person that almost 70% of our people see every morning. And I think they put a major tone on how that child's day is going to work. And part of it is having enough of them makes it a huge. We've been in challenging situations where kids have been late. They miss instructional time because of that. Do we want that? No. The more we can do to do that, the better it is. So Personally, I think it's the first and last thing they see during the day as a bus driver, and it is an impactful piece. I know it's one that we don't see a lot, and it's one that's kind of on the back burner, but one that I think we need to address.
When it's not there, it has a huge impact on children and their families.
Sure.
So,
Oh, and then also you walk through the bus garage,
Mhm.
right? In
Ye-
August you
yes.
toured it. So
Yes.
it's not just the recruitment piece
No.
and retention. I mean, you saw what the sides of the building looked like. You
We're-
saw the drainage, you saw the porta potty.
I don't even know how they stay in their seats when they're pulling those buses out of that lot because of all the bumps and the craters out there. It is not an optimum facility. And I wonder, I was going to ask you also, another one of my crazy questions that popped in my head. How often does a bus, if you have 3 different routes, do most of them come in and out of there 3 times a day?
No, they're out doing their route, and then they come back. A lot of them come back at that midday portion.
Uh-huh.
And a good thing to have is the ability for them to rest or be there
Right.
before they go to the next one, and we don't really have that. We don't have a place. So
Yeah,
that's
'cause-
why you'll see in multiple times buses
Parked, yeah.
in different places.
Right.
That the reality is that it would be in often case better to go back to where they're at, take
Okay.
all out, do that, and move to that location. So, yeah, they don't always go back.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a couple quick questions. One is about just our PI, our PI fund itself. You know, we've gone through multiple rounds at looking at the needs of our facilities, and I'm looking at maybe the 3 to 5 year range. Just placing this project in context, has there anything from the district's perspective that we've tried to identify that would meet a need that we have not met, or that a future board would meet within 3 to 5 years? Have we identified some of those major projects, since we do have funds to meet some construction needs at this point? We recognize the timeline, but are we in the position as a district, as we look at our needs currently, again, narrowing at maybe 3 to 5 years, that we have not met?
That's a great question, Todd. I will tell you that because of the ESSER funding, we've already spent $1.5 million on maintenance needs for our buildings. We've got another $1.6 million that's still obligated, and those were to replace chillers in all of our elementary buildings. So that's terrific. We've done that. Some of those chillers, you know, we're close to the end of life. We're able to take these resources. So that's PI funds we didn't have to spend because of the ESSER dollars that were available. And several roofs have been done as well. And Eric can take it from here, but I don't believe there's anything major out there other than finishing that connector, which we're still working with the state on.
So I do want to finish the connector. That's actually being held up at OFCC at this point as far as their entire process. So eventually we'll get to that point, which is one of the reasons we do want to protect the PI fund, and the loan becomes a vehicle to do that. Yeah, we've done a variety of things. I mean, I think at this point we've upgraded many of the systems in all the buildings from the ESSER perspective and PI perspective. I don't see major things that need to go on. We've replaced 100% of all the chillers, or will have replaced 100% of all the chillers in the building, and the chiller is really just a big term for the big air conditioners that are all at all the buildings that were the elementaries that are not the new high school and middle school. Those will all be done between now and January, July. So all those will be in over the summer. We've really addressed most of the needs. Where we haven't addressed it is at the bus garage. There are going to be needs that PI is going to still need to be there. We're going to have, smaller projects, smaller things, pumps and other things that money's available to do. So I definitely want to protect that and continue to make sure that we're moving forward. But I don't see another major construction need in the district. One thing we are going to be going for, which this project actually helps, and I didn't even bring it up, is that we are applying for a Department of Energy grant for new air handlers in the buildings, which actually allow us to replace some of those with some more energy efficient models. But the new project here allows us to get one key piece to that, which is upgrade the electric at the bus garage and also potentially do solar on the roof, which would allow those pieces to go. So I think it's a positive.
So
My
thinking
question-
about that connector itself, if we were to look at financing the connector and looking at the PI fund again, how do we pay for that connector? Are we budgeting for that connector now, or?
We still have money in our construction funds to pay for that.
Okay, so,
My question would be, based on Todd's, I know the old Central Academy, which is now our early childhood center, is probably the oldest building, and we still own that building, correct? I look at that facility, I've been inside of it, it's been a few years. I don't know in terms of what kinds of needs that would have, but I would think there would be some there just
are.
based upon its age.
There are.
And so that's where my mind is going in regards to all of our elementary buildings seem to be, they're relatively new. Our high school, middle school, relatively new. Hopefully our bus garage will also be. But that early childhood center is not.
So we have, through partnerships with the ESC, upgraded multiple things there, including technology. There is a roof that's going to need to be on there, which is not anywhere near what we're talking about as far as the pricing that's here. They have upgraded the air conditioning and boiler systems in those, so that's a partnership with the ESC, which is part of their contract.
And I don't want to speak out of turn, but it just doesn't seem like a great space. When I was in it, the stairs, the age, just the entire vibe of that building was not as, I don't know, welcoming as other districts, other facilities. As a parent, that would be a consideration for me if I had children entering into a preschool system. Visiting that building, it does not seem to be as, I don't know, cutting edge, welcoming, just happy as other spaces. And
That
so
would be an opportunity.
when we have these conversations, that's where I'm thinking is that definite need, the ESSER dollars, of course, I think in my mind makes sense because of the timing, et cetera. I don't want to see us lock in to an opportunity that's going to eliminate us to solve a different concern that is identified within our state report card in terms of our readiness and some of our young people's readiness scores has been for a long period of time. And for us to really transition our district and transition the opportunities for the young people in our district, those, in my mind, are priorities. And I would love to be able to do it all, but sometimes you can't. And so that would be my one concern, is that I drive by that building often, and every time I drive by, I don't see a vibrant, happy preschool, unfortunately. And it's not to take away from the teachers there who probably make it a very happy, vibrant preschool. I don't think the environment is as suitable as it could be.
Just to touch on Chris, as far as the Head Start, which is, my son came out of that school last year, and the kids really do love it. I mean, I absolutely agree, it probably could use some updating, but it really, without them, my son would not be in kindergarten today. He would not be ready. They do have a real heart in that. And my thoughts on that is, I understand your concerns, Chris, on it, but is that Butler County is the ones who are doing the teaching, and that it's not actually Middletown City School, from my understanding, that does these. So wouldn't that be something we would look at potentially partnering with Butler County to try to update and pay for maybe a new building or some upgraded stuff, because they're the ones that are in there?
It's the same analogy with this project when Peterman
I
owns
get
the
you on that
buses.
too, yeah, because.
Other than the contracts are different, the way that they're
I
written as
understand
far as
that.
to do that. And the building is ours, so we do have a contract with them to share expense with how that building gets upgraded. So I agree, it is a portion of ours. Do I think that we're setting aside enough to do that? I do. that's something we need to look at. It is definitely a concern going forward.
But I mean,
do
I
see-
can also say, like, from the public's perspective, where the issue came in of people being upset with the community center, losing that funding for the community center and it going to transportation, is that 99% of the community and parents out there think that Peterman owns the bus garage. That Peterman is the ones who control all of the transportation, that they own everything. So why should Middletown be putting money into a bus garage we don't own? So I understand where the confusion's coming from there, but like you said, the bus drivers, they're hauling 66.4% of our kids, they are the first person that these kids see in the morning and the last person they see in the afternoon. And, you know, I mean, I've not talked to all the bus drivers, but I do know several of them. And, you know, their tone and their mood and their happiness really potentially sets the day for these kids going into school. And, you know, I personally want to know that, you know, the bus drivers are they don't have anything really to be worrying about as far as like their facilities and the equipment that they drive and whatnot, because I want to be able to make sure that their attentiveness is on the kids. Because there are some kids that like they don't go home to love. They just don't. And that bus driver is the last bit of it they're getting when they step off. So.
And to Chris's point, you know, for every $1 million that we would borrow using PI funds to repay those, we're looking at less than 4% of the annual revenue. So it doesn't tie up much at all. I do believe over time, because of what we've been able to do with the ESSER dollars, replacing all the chillers, replacing some of the roofing units, that we're going to build an excess in the PI fund over the next 5 years. Unless something major happens, weather, who knows. But that's why we want to protect those dollars. And as we do have a buildup in surplus, we can pay this off early if need be. It's not something we're tied to for the 15 years. And again, if rates drop significantly in the next 3 to 4 years, again, we can refinance it and pay a lot less in finance costs. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and I don't, you know, I guess I don't have reservation at this point to say that we would be in a hardship by doing this, that we won't be able to do other projects later. I think we're in good, sound financial position, not just in the general fund, but in the PI fund as well.
And again, I'm going to let the information marinate, but we have approximately $5.75 million of ESSER funding based upon your figures up there, plus or minus a little. I would feel way more comfortable if we had a project that reflected the amount of ESSER dollars that we did not, the Medicaid and the escrow and the PI availability. And maybe that's not enough to capture what exactly we need. And again, I'm going to take your report and analyze it more, but I have reservations on the other allocation.
And I understand that. I can tell you that that will not be enough to get done what needs to get done in the time frame that we need to do it. So, and I can tell you that piecemealing it out, I don't have the time to get it done in that time frame legally. So from the ESSER portion, that would have to, we would have to send a massive portion of that back based upon what I can tell you today, just being flat out honest. So.
You're good? Okay, guys, so I know that was lots and lots and lots of information. All right, so we have 2 weeks between now and March 25th. So I encourage you to look over the presentation again, jot down your notes. Reach out. I mean, Eric's available. We're all available. Reach out, ask the questions. If you want to come in and sit down, you want to come in once, you want to come in twice, we're here to help you understand that information. But just, and as Eric explained to you, and you know, and you've heard this the whole entire time, that this is a speedy project. We have the timelines, and September 24th is quickly coming and approaching. And then also shout out to Eric and his team, because this project has gone to the top of the priority list because of, you know, this was a Plan B. that his team has had to, elevate this and the time that's gone into this, Eric. And just thank you for everything that you've done and what you laid out tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one last, just on your last point there, the 5.7 would not be enough. And so essentially is what you're saying is that we need to spend 8 or we won't be able to utilize the ESSER dollars.
I don't know that we will be able to get all of it at that point. I do not feel comfortable that we would have enough to do all the underground drainage, all the things that need to happen to get there, to make that functional enough to do it in the time frame. Could we do something? Sure. I think it will take longer time frame to get that done than what I have to get it, if it's not a complete piece. So
Okay.
that's just gut feel for where I'm at, and when I'm talking to the construction people, is that we have a very specific legal process of bidding that has to go. We've done a lot of that, and it's baked into this that's happened over the last 3 months.
So doing less takes more time?
No, doing less takes more time legally. So as far as to go through all the things that would have to do that in the lead times, the other part of it is that the way that this is as far as a building, a lot of the front is upfront cost that can be ESSER done between now and that time frame. So
All right.
I have one other question, too. I'm thinking about the loan itself. I know that Chris has raised questions about the Medicaid funding. You'll have to give me some of these numbers, because I've got a lot of numbers going through my head at this point. But if we're thinking about the ESSER funds, in addition to the loan that gets us, does that get us in the ballpark then of somewhere around the $8.5 million? Am I right? Or is it a little bit more of that? Is it a little north of that? I mean, if I guess my question is this: I think that, if the board comes back in 2 weeks and we have a healthy discussion about the future of the project, if we're looking at trying to narrow the scope, if we were going in that direction, absent the Medicaid funding, what's the total that we're looking at there?
Well, you'd still be looking at needing $8 million for the project, and there's a variety of ways we can finance that.
Right.
Right now, let's be honest, our carryover balance is strong enough in the general fund. Instead of borrowing $2 million, we could take it straight out of the general fund. I don't recommend it, because, that's our gold standard right there, and
Right.
I like to protect that the best we can for all the things we have to do district-wide. The Medicaid funds have been there since 2009. The year after I got here, and we did there to protect us in case the feds came back, did an audit, and decided the 4 years of Medicaid payments that they dropped on us in 2009, in case they overpaid us. It's been 9 years. They're not coming back for that at this point. 7 years is usually the window, top of the line, so that money has been there. Each time I receive those monies each year, we do get a Medicaid check. I usually do take 40% of that and set it aside, just in case anything happens. But the last 3 years, it's only been $600,000 total, so it's been a much smaller amount. Not as big of a deal as when we got that lump sum, and we didn't have any other cash to fall back on in 2009 as we're trying to grow our reserve. But yeah, we can be very, I won't need to borrow this $2 million if we went with this plan, probably until the fall, because all the ESSER dollars will be used first.
Right.
So we have a lot of time to look at that, think about it, maybe use some PI funds if that's building up enough by then. So we have a lot of flexibility, but we just showed you a scenario to get to the 8 or the $10 million options.
Okay.
Yeah,
Appreciate that clarification.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You've been standing for over an hour. So you can take a seat.
it's been great. I do appreciate the time. Thank you very
No, I
much.
appreciate you.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, I think we're at the consent agenda. Are we?
We are.
Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
In a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, anything to highlight, Mr. Bertram? Anything within the consent agenda?
Nothing on my end?
Nothing on your
We
end?
have a couple contracts, right? Well, you see the tutor job description, which appeared on the last board agenda. So this is the actual adoption of the tutor agenda or tutor job description tonight. Also, Butler County ESC, that's for AI training for our administrators, 4 sessions at $150 apiece. We have a personnel agenda. And then we also have the Summer Bridge Program, where we work with Butler County ESC to service families over the summer.
Yeah, they did a nice job presenting it here a couple years ago on the value of that.
We
That's good.
serviced 80 families last year in Summer Bridge, so it will be about the same this year.
Any questions? Mr. Bertram, we're ready for you.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mrs. Snow?
Yeah.
Ms. Hauser, anything from committees from our last meeting to now?
We did not have any. I would like to say the DLP is Thursday. So
Mhm.
we do have that committee coming up. So, but
And
no-
do we meet
no-
tomorrow
Yeah,
with
we
the
meet
city?
Tomorrow, yes, 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Up here? Okay.
If I could add, OSBA, Kenna Haycox reached out. We finally connected, finally, our paths are on the same path now. And what we started about 3 years ago, you may recall, we set up a contract for them to do a review of all our contracts, all of our handbooks, make sure they're in alignment with our union contracts. Well, the pandemic put that on hold, and then there were staff shortages at OSBA. Imagine that, more staff shortages. And we're finally back on track, having a meeting with her next week sometime. Thought it was going to be Tuesday, but we have to change that to get that process rolling again. So part of the policy committee will be to reactivate that, get it going, and I certainly feel good about going through that process one more time as I'm the treasurer, so it sets a clear path then when I do leave in 2 years that it's going to be set up for the next treasurer. So,
Will policy committee be looking at like our open enrollment policies?
yes, and that's expedited. Hopefully we'll get that real soon. We're
Okay,
gonna
because I
talk
know
about
those
that
windows are
next week.
starting to open up
Yep.
for people.
Yeah,
and
hope
so-
to have that at the next board meeting, that you'll have those ready for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Education reports. Ms. Snow, anything to report tonight?
Well, last week, got to do the judging for the Sodexo, what was that? The
Future
Sodexo
Chef?
Food
Student Chef.
Chef Challenge, that was it, I was looking for the right words. Anita and Chris were also with us, and, I mean, it was really, really fun, it was great, those kids were awesome. The food was great. Like, it was so hard to try to narrow down even one. Like, it was just not possible. I'm really glad we didn't have to do that. They just did a points-based system. But it really, really was a great experience. And getting to talk to the ladies that were over that and their vision to potentially expand it to the middle school and the high school in the coming years, like, I really, really look forward to that. I think the kids will really like that.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, anything?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to say thank you to Eric. This is a large project. There's a lot of pieces to this, and I think you've done a really nice job of trying to bring this together for the board. I know we have a lot to consider in the next 2 weeks as we look at this project, but I really do appreciate all the work that you've put into it, and I thought you did a nice job in the presentation.
Yeah, and I would like to repeat that. I was going to send you an email, but I'll tell you now. This is very complete and thorough. And I know you spent a lot of time working on this, so thank you very much.
That all?
That's it.
All right. Ms. Mulligan, anything to report tonight?
A little bit. Are we going to do something in the policy committee about cell phones? Was it somebody gave us an article about how cell phones are such a distraction, and I just wondered if we need to review our policy on cell phones.
Well, we could definitely review the policy. I mean,
Yeah.
it has been brought up in different arenas,
Uh-huh.
cell phones in schools. We can look at the policy.
It seems to be that people know they're bad for kids to be distracted by those during the day, but we don't enforce those rules usually. So, yeah, that was a
So
problem.
then there's also the flip, because some of the teachers use cell phones as part of their instruction in the
Right,
classroom.
right,
There are
right.
so many different avenues when it comes to technology in the classroom
Yeah.
right now, yeah.
It would be hard to come up with a policy that pleases everybody, but we ought to at least be aware. the whole thing about the bus garage and everything, that's a silly name for it, but it's a facility. This is anti-form follows function, but can we find a way to make that more useful with the kids? I mean, to go watch oil being changed or old ladies changing tires or things like that.
I think that's all up for discussion, especially with our Passport to Tomorrow and how students are
Right,
getting out.
right.
To visit and observe, and, yeah, maybe they could intern.
Maybe they could spend one of their individual learning days there. They could open that up. Of course,
Learn how to pump
the
gas.
personnel would be giving generously their
All
time.
possible.
Have they adopted a class yet?
They have,
They have?
they did their first one.
There we go.
Did what?
They're an adopted class partner now.
Oh,
I knew that was in the works, but I didn't know they started. Very good.
That's cool, very nice. I wonder what other schools, all the surrounding schools have bus facilities, and I wonder if they make any academic use of those. We
It could
could,
be the first.
yeah, lead the way. Looking forward to the DLT meeting Thursday. Did you say we have something Tuesday? Or is it?
Chris does.
Oh, okay.
Chris has a meeting Tuesday.
Okay, then that's all I have. Well, thank you, Eric. I called Eric with some questions I had, and it eased my mind very much.
Good. And if you have any more, call again.
That's all.
That's it. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Randy, for being a strong fiscal agent for us, so we have the money to do projects like this. You don't have one without the other, so thank you for that. Like Holly had indicated, Anita and I and three of us, we did our best judging. The spicy chicken wontons were strong. Took the recipe home. The young people did a great job, but the adults, you can tell, really care about mentoring them too. And so that was equally as impressive. And seeing the parents taking pictures, being as excited, that was a good event. And they did a very nice job. I'd like to congratulate our basketball team. They played Centerville yesterday. Centerville was the #1 seed within their district, and it was a really good game at Cintas Center in Cincinnati. The basketball team, the cheer team, all the young people who traveled to Cincinnati, our team did exceptionally well this season. Coach Edwards should be extremely proud. The young men that were on the team did an extremely good job. The cheer team did a great job supporting. And so it was a very successful winter season for all of our sport teams, and it's exciting to see our basketball team because I know the rich history of basketball in Middletown. To see that come to life again with a Midi alum as the coach does not go unnoticed. Spring sports are starting. I just came from across the street from where a scrimmage for spring baseball was taking place. I wish all the young people a really exciting and fun spring. And so, Mr. Bertram.
Yeah, I'd say last week I had a great vacation cruising, relaxed quite a bit, slept a lot more than I usually do, and I did a lot of food tasting there, but I did miss the Future Chefs of Tomorrow. I mean, that is an excellent, I'm glad you got to experience that, Holly. That is so neat to seeing those kids, the smiles, the excitement coming from them, participating in that. And it's been 3 or 4 years since we've had it pre-pandemic, so I'm glad that's back up and it's going to grow. Very exciting. And I too want to thank Eric. When we brought Eric on as our business manager, you know, I thought I'd be leaving at the end of this year. One of the things that I told him initially is I said, you know, one of the things that I wanted to see through while I was here, since we've touched every building, except the ELC, and I understand that situation certainly, was transportation. I said, I certainly hope that you can do something with that after I'm gone. I didn't know he's going to expedite it, and I was going to extend a few more years, so I'm really excited to be here to be a part of that. You know, whatever direction the board decides we go with that, we know something has to happen there, and we're going to see improvement, so I'm excited about that. And Midi basketball, fantastic. That was exciting to see. I wish they could have beat the Elks. That'd been a big deal. My wife and I know a lot of people in Centerville. Wish we could have had those bragging rights, but next year. We'll get them next year.
Something also to extend about the basketball game is it was incredible how many parents and community members traveled down to Cintas Center to watch our boys and the girls, the cheerleaders, everybody. I mean, there was purple through and through at the Cintas Center, so that was really exciting. Also proud to say, as of today, we have 10 classes now with Midi Minutes Matter with 7 days of perfect attendance. So that is starting to catch on. So our students are starting to, that's like a buzz. If you remember, 7 days of perfect attendance, Milton's Donuts for everyone in the classroom. So as of today, we've had 10.
I'm
So
going to
that's-
have to increase that budget.
You are. Also, we have an adopt-a-class partner on the 4th floor also, the finance department. And we had Ms. Hupke's class over on the 4th floor last week on, it was Wednesday? Thursday.
Thursday.
It was on Thursday. So they came over and spent about 3 hours on the 4th floor to learn what we do here in the different offices. So it was great to see them for the adopt-a-class partners.
Great
Yeah, so
class.
that was a fun event. And yes, and also Sodexo, big shout out to Sodexo for reviving Pantry Chef. That was a favorite event before COVID, and it's definitely gonna be a favorite after. That's all. I
Okay.
have.
Is there a motion for adjournment
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Anyone against this? Mr. Bertrand?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries.